The Iranian Embassy, South Kensington, London. On April 30th, 11:30 a.m, 6 gunmen rushed and stormed into the Iranian embassy, firing shots, holding everyone in the room hostage. Within a matter of minutes, the terrorists had secured the whole building, barricading the windows and holding a total of 22 people against their will. One of the 26 hostages was a police constable, PC Trevor Locke. Shortly after the terrorists had rushed into the room, undetected, he managed to quickly press the emergency button on his radio before getting it taken off of him by one of the gunmen. With that, the police were informed. Out of the 6 gunmen, 1 could speak English, and it was the lead gunman, Owen Ali Mohammed, or Salim, codenamed by the police. The reason for the attack was because of the oppression of the Arab population in Arabistan, and they wanted to grab the attention of both the media and the world so that they can demand the release of 91 prisoners from Iranian prisons. Their next demand was a coach to take them and the hostages over to Heathrow, and a plane to fly them out of the UK. If the demands were not met, the hostages would die. To grab as much intel as possible, the police needed to make a contact with Salim, and they got Police Chief Inspector Max Vernon to negotiate with Salim over the phone. The police wanted to solve the issue as peacefully as possible, and didn't think the army would be able to de-escalate this kind of situation. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had a deep determination to not let the terrorists win. She does not negotiate with terrorists. She thought that the issue needed the army, the Special Air Service. The police were leading the negotiation, but they had the army on standby if any of the hostages were harmed. The Special Air Service, or SAS, were a special forces unit designed to take on counter-terrorism, hostage rescue, direct action, and covert reconnaissance. And there would be the people to assault the building if things escalated. The gunmen were awaiting a response from the Iranian foreign minister. They responded and denied the freedom of the 91 prisoners. Salim was furious. He set a deadline at 12 p.m, and if the prisoners weren't released before noon, they would kill all the hostages. As time went on, a hostage was feeling very ill, and the police refused to send in doctors, and Salim had no other choice but to release the hostage. The hostage was Chris Kramer, a member of the BBC. The second he was released and brought in by a doctor, he told the police everything that he knew. He explained that the gunmen were heavily armed with grenades and machine pistols. The time was 12 p.m, and the deadline just arrived. No gunshots were heard, no screams, just nothing. The gunmen repeated their demands and kept threatening to kill the hostages. The Metropolitan Commissioner tries pleading with the gunmen and explains that they don't have the power to make a demand like releasing 91 prisoners. Salim was persistent and continued threatening the police. Later that night, the SAS arrived 3 miles away from the embassy, dressed up as civilians. They were discreetly walking to a building next door to the embassy to set up as a base of operations. This as well to quickly gear up and breach if a hostage was harmed. With little information they had about the building and the terrorists, there was so little for them to do. They had to wait for information to determine the best possible approach. MI5 technicians drilled holes in the wall next to the embassy using hand drills. This was so they could insert microphones to listen in on what the terrorists were saying. In order for them to drill undetected, pilots at Heathrow were told to fly low over the embassy. Though then drilling holes through the wall caused bricks to poke out and got Salim and his crew suspicious, the odds were now improving. On day 3, the police figured that everyone would be getting hungry at this point, and they decided to play Mr. Nice Guy and sent in food for the terrorists. While doing so, they were doing this secretly to snatch photos and fingerprints of the terrorists to build a profile and figure out who they were. Their identities remained a mystery until the police contacted the British Embassy in Baghdad to check recent visa applications. They were in luck as they found pictures of the gunmen and gave the SAS a little briefing on whom to kill and whom to keep out of the crosshairs. Whilst in the briefing, Lance Corporal John McAleese dissected the pictures into detail and looked at distinctive facial features that could easily identify who the hostage takers was. McAleese simply identified and memorised one of the gunmen because they looked like a hawk. This made an immense difference and would play later into the assault. The police looked deeper into the terrorist profiles and found out they bought souvenirs to take back home, and that there was a 7th member. The 7th member, Sami Muhammad Ali, was the mastermind to all of this. He trained the 6 gunmen in Baghdad, supplied them with guns, and ensured them that the terrorists would come back home as heroes. Sami then did a runner to Heathrow Airport and fled the country as the embassy was being seized. The terrorists had no idea what situation they were in and had the mindset that they would be home in 24 hours and that the police would simply comply and let them go. They weren't going anywhere. before. The hostages started pleading with the terrorists, begging them to surrender, and said if publicity is what you want, the best thing to do is surrender. PC Trevor Locke had the sense of guilt not being able to do anything, considering for the last 4 days he's been concealing a revolver in his jacket and had thoughts of using it. But it would be too risky to shoot 6 rounds at 6 heavily armed men. Salim demanded that the BBC would broadcast the situation and tell the world about the Rabistan course so that the prisoners could be released. The hope is for the police, if they make the broadcast happen, the gunmen would hopefully surrender and end the situation peacefully. The BBC agreed to broadcast a statement about the cause at 9 PM. After the broadcast, the hostages started jumping and hugging each other, feeling the sense of relief. Terrorists were beyond pleased and started cheering along with the hostages. It really seemed like the siege would truly be over. There was cheerfulness inside, relief from the outside. This horror might just be over. The police arranged a takeaway and sent it over to the embassy. For the first time in 4 days, the hostages and gunmen sat and ate peacefully together. One of the gunmen took photos using a camera that belonged to one of the hostages. They thought it would make a great souvenir to take back home. According to one of the hostages, BBC sound recorder Sim Harris said how peaceful it was and how he slept quite well that night. After the great news from the broadcast, Salim was happy and was thinking about giving up. When Max Vernon was negotiating with Salim, it almost sounded like in Salim's voice that he maybe thought the right option was to give up. For excitement, one of the gunmen decided to write insulting slogans about Iran's leader. Watching with burning anger, a hostage by the name of Abbas Lavasani didn't like what the gunmen were writing. Faisal, Salim's second in command and the toughest, most stubborn one of the group, didn't take it well and got upset. He then threatened to kill Slavasani. Slavasani was bold and responded, "I am ready to die. You can kill me anytime," almost testing them if they would shoot. According to PC Trevor Locke, the atmosphere went from a happy we're going to go home to the complete opposite. The situation started escalating again. The SAS were updated on the situation and prepared just in case of any hostages are harmed during this escalation. SAS soldiers had the mindset that they felt indestructible and that they were the best, fully capable of handling any kind of counter-terrorism situation. Day 6. Salim was starting to become desperate and demanded that 3 Arab ambassadors should come to the embassy and negotiate safe passage out of the UK. The safe passage that their leader Sami promised was a lie, and he set them all up. Salim was at boiling point, started blaming the police for stalling the arrival of the ambassadors, and started threatening Max Vernon that he would kill a hostage at 6:25 PM. Sim Harris and Trevor Locke pleaded to the police for the Arab ambassadors to come to the embassy. This was now a life or death situation. 3 gunshots were heard, and the police weren't sure if it was a bluff or not, so they waited. It turns out that Abbas Lavasani was killed and left in the halls of the embassy for nearly 6 hours, and at 6:25 PM, his corpse were then kicked out of the door and rested on the pavement. This was really serious because this meant the police's work was done, and now the SAS would step in a heavy-hitting assault. The only way to prevent the assault was to come out of the embassy with their hands up. They crossed the blood-red line, and the time was ticking. Salim went over to Sim Harris and said, "What will the police do now?" And Sim Harris had no idea what would happen. This kind of situation hasn't happened before, and said the only way to stop this is to give up before it gets any worse. After the shed of blood, the gunmen still thought that the police would still get the ambassadors to come to the embassy to ensure a way out of the country. The peaceful time was over, and now brute force was needed. Max Vernon tries to contact Salim, and Salim was freaking out and made the wrong decision to say that they would kill another one in 45 minutes. The clock was ticking, and they had to be stopped. At 7:07, John Dello hands over control from the police to the SAS to contain the situation. The SAS geared up and prepared the assault. Now was the time for the SAS to prepare the assault. Whilst setting up, Max Vernon tried stalling Salim and said that the ambassadors are coming. This kept them busy so that the SAS could breach whilst they have their guard down. In order to carry out the assault, the SAS had to breach all skylights or points of entry simultaneously. The soldiers were on the roof preparing to rappel down to a balcony on the embassy. The code word London Bridge was said. That was the code word to begin the assault. At 7:23 PM, the assault began. Salim was starting to get paranoid about the attack. Max Vernon was trying to calm him down, saying that we're not going to attack. Vernon says that as he sees from across the street an SAS team rappelling down to the embassy. There was a total of 60 SAS soldiers about to storm into the embassy. They were all split into groups, blue team and red team. As team 2 of the red team were rappelling down, the team leader got himself stuck on the rappelling system, and with that the team leader accidentally kicked a window, alerting the terrorists. Salim was suspicious and told Max Vernon that he was going to check out what's going on. The second he put down the phone and walked to the doorway. An explosive breach by the SAS. Team 1 from the red team stormed the skylight and cleared the top floor. Team 2 from the red team tossed a flashbang. Whilst breaching, Team 2 was trying to get the team leader down. Then suddenly the curtains were on fire due to the flashbang, and it started burning the team leader. You could hear the screams from the team leader over the radio, and they tried pulling the team leader closer to the balcony, because if they cut too early, the leader would fall to his death. The team pulled the leader closer to the balcony, and the team on the roof cut the leader down. The leader had severe burns on his left leg, but with courage and determination, he continues the mission and infiltrates the embassy. The soldiers are in the building. The rooms were smoggy, and you could see the shine of light from the soldiers' MP5 submachine guns. With no second to lose, the SAS stormed the embassy with good communication and teamwork. The teams cleared the hall smoothly. The SAS knew every square inch of the building due to the intense training exercises they carried out during the 5 days of the siege. During the 5 days of negotiating with Salim, the carpenters went to Hereford Base and built a life-size replica of the embassy for the soldiers to train and leave no stone unturned. Lance Corporal John McAleese places a frame charge on one of the windows outside of the embassy. One of the hostages, Sim Harris, spotted McAleese. Harris thought it was a police officer. McAleese bangs on the window, shouting, "Get away from the window!" Sim Harris gets away from the window, and John McAleese detonates the frame charge. A loud explosion with a gigantic cloud of smoke. McAleese climbs into the embassy and tells Sim Harris to stay where he is. McAleese continues to breach the building with his team. On the second floor in the telex room, 2 of the gunmen started opening fire on 2 of the hostages. One died almost instantly. The other hostage, Amid Dadgar, was shot 6 times, but managed to remain conscious and alive. Dadgar and the other hostages persuaded the gunmen to surrender. From outside, the weapons were thrown out the window, and a white flag appears. The SAS burst into the room. Without hesitation, they grabbed the 2 gunmen, threw them on the wall, and unleashed a magazine into them. While this was going on, Max Vernon could hear the screams and horror from the hostages over the phone, and Max couldn't but feel utter failure that he let the SAS breach the building. He wanted to contain the situation peacefully. Salim and Trevor Locke were in the room, and Trevor pulled out his revolver, and Salim responded with, "Please don't hurt me, Mr. Trevor. It wasn't me, it was the others. I told them that you were saying was true, but they wouldn't listen. They wanted to carry on." Then suddenly, Salim tries to disarm Trevor, and they started to wrestle on the ground until a smoke grenade came in the door, and an SAS soldier kicks down the door. Salim froze like a deer in the headlights, and the soldier only shouted, "Trevor, get away!" Salim was dead. He died before he even hit the ground. Salim lay dead on the floor next to Trevor Locke. Salim looked lifeless, and time was running out. Parts of the embassy caught fire. The SAS needed to get the hostages and themselves out of the building. When the SAS extract people, they don't play around. They were chucking the hostages from soldier to soldier down the stairs. The soldiers extracted the hostages and take good looks at them to identify the hostages. The soldiers on the stairs grab each person and take a good look at them. Something felt a little off, as 2 of the gunmen were missing. A soldier grabs another hostage and takes a long, good stare. One of the soldiers kicks the hostage down the stairs. 2 of the soldiers unleash a whole magazine into the hostage, leaving 27 holes in him. The hostage was actually a terrorist disguised as a hostage. It was a close call because the terrorist was holding a grenade in his hand. Time was running out, and the soldiers extracted all the hostages and placed them outside the embassy handcuffed. With all the hostages handcuffed, there was no major threat, and they could wrap the whole situation up. Suddenly, the hostage, Sim Harris, said that one of the hostages outside was a terrorist, and it turns out it was true. The terrorist was separated from the hostages, and they locked him up, sentenced the terrorist to life in prison. Finally, the nightmare was over, and the hordes of people outside of the embassy couldn't believe what they were seeing. The SAS was unknown to the public until now, and they gained a massive reputation for extracting 19 hostages and killing 5 of the terrorists within 11 minutes. This marks a day in British history. The Special Air Service had committed an act of bravery Margaret Thatcher was proud to see the strong acts of courage performed by the SAS. They made us all feel so proud to be British. The numbers of soldiers signing up for the Special Air Service rose dramatically. The media recorded footage of the SAS infiltrating the building. It became famous and shown to the world that we are not afraid of anyone, and if anyone tries to threaten our country, we stand ready.